what it means to apply for a home loan that requires pre-qualification. Today on Connect with Skip Heitzig, we take that principle to a whole new level. Pre-qualifying before you mate for life. Get pre-qualified. Finding a mate. That is the title of our message. This is Scott Dooley. Welcome, and stand by for a practical and important teaching from Skip Heitzig. Dating can be exciting. It can also get weird and end poorly. I like the common sense of one who quipped, "Some people are unmarried for the same reason that some drivers run out of gas. They pass too many filling stations looking for their favorite brand." Though dating was unknown in biblical times, we will continue to review healthy principles in building a relationship to help you pre-qualify for a solid, long-lasting, and satisfying smart home. Now, here's Skip Heitzig as we explore Genesis chapters 24 and 29.
It immediately raises the level of the dating relationship to a spiritual level. It takes it from the physical plane, how am I looking, how am I doing? It raises it up to the best level. And if you're looking for an icebreaker, this is it. Like, what do I say first? How about let's pray? That'll break the ice. Now, if there's resistance, that's a red flag. If she goes, I don't want to pray. Don't say get out then. But you know. But if there's resistance, that's a red flag. You see, when a person prays and you pray with somebody else, you are getting insight into their relationship with God or not. Immediately. You're getting a read on their relationship with God. So I think that's important. In fact, I always ask engaged couples, what role does God play in your relationship? This is a pretty standard boilerplate question for a pastor to ask. I remember one time years ago, I asked this of a couple. Their wedding was a Saturday. I had met with them. I was meeting with them on a Friday, the day before their wedding. I suppose that they had gone through our classes. So I asked the question. I said, what role does God play in your relationship? They looked at me like I was a zombie. I go, what? I said, yeah, do you read the Bible ever? Do you pray together? What role does God play? Can you just tell me how the Lord has led your relationship? And this gal, future bride, looked at me and she goes, it's none of your business. So I paused and I thought, how will I put this? I said, okay, so you guys know I'm a pastor, right? And so you probably figured, I'm thinking that pastors every now and then like to talk about God. Kind of a no-brainer. So here's the pastor talking to you about God. What role does God play? And she was infuriated. She got up and she walked out of the room. Well, I did not feel comfortable doing the wedding the next day, so I didn't. And I knew in-laws would come in and they had the party set and it was set, but we did not do it here and I did not do the wedding. I don't know where it ever happened to them, but it didn't happen here. So there needs to be separation. There needs to be supplication. Here's a third principle, selectivity. Selectivity. Now, I want you to go over a few chapters. I mentioned chapter 29 as well as 24. So go to the right a few blocks till you get to chapter 29. We're fast forwarding now an entire generation. This is now the next generation. The guy in play here is not Isaac, but Jacob. Jacob is himself wife hunting. It's the best way I can put it, because he didn't have a servant finding a wife for him. He ran away from home, so he's kind of on his own. He's wife hunting. And he comes to the old country of his forefathers. And I'm going to take you down to verse 9. He's at the well as well. He's there, that's sort of like town central back in those days. So verse 9, while he was still speaking with them, that is servants of Laban, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And it came to pass when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near, so he's kind of making the move now, he's going close, and rolled a stone away from the well's mouth, getting a little closer, kind of like, hey, let me take care of that for you, and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Then, watch this verse, then Jacob kissed Rachel. So that's pretty cool, right? He's like getting real close to her, moving the stone away, and now he's within striking distance. So it's like moves it away and plants one right there, right by the well. But the rest of the verse, then Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. Now, come on, you guys should be roaring in laughter right now because of that. That is one of the weirdest verses in the whole Bible. What guy kisses a girl and they go, what? She's thinking, do I have bad breath? Do I need to go home? That's just weird. I don't know, it was a long journey, hot sun, but he was the emotional type. If you remember Jacob, he was the kid who kind of like baked bread with his mom and wasn't outside much. I don't know what the deal is. Maybe he's just weeping for joy. So, in verse 15, go down a few verses, Laban said to Jacob, because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? So he wants to hang around, he wants to be with this girl, and so he wants a job. So tell me, he says, what should your wages be? Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, the name of the younger was Rachel. That's the one he wants. He's selected her, he's picked her. Leah's eyes were delicate, but Rachel was beautiful of form and appearance. Okay, now stop right there. Jacob understood the culture. It is customary for the oldest daughter to be married first, not the second oldest. But he wants the second oldest, not the oldest. They're both described in that verse, verse 17. Leah's eyes were delicate, Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Listen to that same verse in the New Living Translation. Leah had pretty eyes, but Rachel was beautiful in every way, with a lovely face and a shapely figure. And he said, I want that one. He knew exactly what he wanted. He was making a selection. That one, he thought, was perfect for me. Now, speaking of that, some of you are looking for the perfect person, okay? There is no perfect person. There's a perfect person for you, and you can argue, is there only one or are there many? Not going to get into that. But you won't find somebody who is perfect. We have a name for people looking for perfect people. They're called bachelors. And they just sort of stay that way, or bachelorettes. It's like the guy who was getting up there in age and he had never married, and his friend said, how come you never married? He goes, well, I never found the right gal. He goes, come on, the right gal. You've met plenty of gals. Surely one of them must have been okay. He goes, well, there was one girl, and she was perfect. He goes, why didn't you marry her? He said, because she was looking for the perfect husband. So if you're looking for perfection, not going to happen, but there is a perfect one out there for you. And for Jacob, you saw Rachel. That was perfect for him. That's what he thought. Now, this does bring up an issue. What is it that attracts people to people? What attracts us to each other? It's interesting how that certain features in one person are attractive to one person, but not to another one. Now, scientists have studied this, and they call it love mapping, or a love map. That in your brain, you've got just the chemical, anatomical circuitry that causes a person to be attracted to certain features of another person. You look and go, wow, and you're drawn in. Some would even say, that's love at first sight. One of the experts of this, by the name of Helen Fisher, said the issue of love at first sight brings up the speculation of a biological origin to this phenomenon. So some of you are going, awesome, I thought so. But wait, there's more. She adds this, in terms of human courtship and marriage, several observations are important. The infatuation phase, that's the wow phase at first. The infatuation phase tends to wane after 4 years or less. This may be in part a reflection of the human brain's inability to stay in a revved up mode over a long period of time. So folks, this is why the Bible says, beauty is passing, but a woman who fears the Lord, she will be praised. There's more to it than just the immediate, there's the eventual. A woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Rachel was not her father's choice, as we're going to see in a moment. Rachel was not even his father's choice. His father came from the same culture. Firstborn girls always get married first. So the dads, the families wouldn't have agreed. However, that's the one he selected. That's the one he wanted. That was his choice. In our culture of dating, we choose our mates. So I'm just saying to you, choose well. Be discriminate, be careful, select well. Yes, take others into consideration, but that's not the be-all, end-all of it. So if Jacob would have said, well, I'm going to do whatever my dad selects or whoever her dad selects, they wouldn't have gotten married. But that's the one he believed was the right one for him. He had to live with that choice. Once upon a time, there was a young man who fell in love with a young woman. He decided to bring her home to meet his mother. His mother disliked the young girl immensely and would not give the blessing for this couple to continue. He disliked her, she disliked her, and refused to give the blessing. Well, this frustrated the young man, and so he found another girl and brought her home, and the same thing happened. Mom rejected her. This happened 3 times. So now he's very exasperated. The young man, in desperation, decides that he's going to find a girl just like Mom. And he does. He finds a young girl who walked like his mom walked and talked like his mom talked and even looked a lot like his mom, and he brought her home to meet his mother. He thought, surely my mother will approve. Well, it didn't go very well. His father couldn't stand her. Moral of the story is, if you get married just because that's the one mom and dad want me to have, or my friends tell us we look cute together as a couple, those are dumb reasons to get married. You take others into consideration, you bring them into the relationship. At the end of the day, you make the selection. You're going to live with that girl. You're going to live with that guy. So you make the right choice. So separation, supplication, selectivity. A fourth, sacrifice. Now you see this in the next couple verses. Verse 18, Jacob loved Rachel, so he said, I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. Dude, come on. That's sacrifice. 7 years for a chick. And Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to another man. Stay with me. Jacob knew exactly what he wanted, but he's willing to wait. He's willing to sacrifice. He's willing to work 7 years in this case. I know a lot of guys who would quit after a couple unanswered phone calls, let alone wait 7 years, or one deep conversation, meaningful conversation. I'm out of here. But he waits 7 years. In fact, if you go down to verse 20, it says, they seemed like a few days to him because of the love that he had for her. Now, in spending 7 years working for future father-in-law would not only give him a job, but would give him an opportunity to get close to her, to observe her, to watch her family situation. The sacrifice was worth the payoff. I'm going to learn a lot about the family dynamic over a period of time. This would ensure that this relationship is not based on hormones or pheromones, but Godamones, right? God has to be involved, and this has to work out, and that 7 years would allow that to happen. By the way, speaking of patience and sacrifice, girls, if you're dating a guy and he says something to you like, oh, I love you so much, I just want to get physical with you and have sex with you, and I love you so much, I just can't wait. You drop him like a hot potato. And don't look back. Because love is patient and love is kind. Every relationship involves sacrifice. And I'm preaching to the choir here because if you're married, you know it involves sacrifice on a number of levels. You sacrifice your independence in part. You certainly sacrifice self-will a lot. You have to sacrifice personal activities, solo plans, certain freedoms. You sacrifice spending your money, spending your time. Let me add something that you need to be willing to sacrifice. You need to be willing to sacrifice the back door. I want to explain that. You know, when you're building a smart home and you have doors and windows, there's one thing you want to make sure you don't have in a smart home is a back door. If you have one, seal it, shut it. Don't let it be used. The back door is divorce. If you go from dating to mating, that's when you close the back door. You never allowed divorce to be brought up in a conversation. It was a covenant my wife and I made before we got married. We said, we will never use the word divorce, even if we're really angry at each other. That's one no-no. We'll never use it. We'll never talk about it. We'll never joke about it. And it's never been brought up. So you close that back door. That's part of the sacrifice. I'm going from dating to mating, close the back door. Now, speaking of sacrifice, that leads us to a fifth pre-qualification principle that just sort of takes sacrifice up a notch. It's called stamina. Because after all, this relationship needs to stand the test of time if you've closed the back door. So back to our text. 7 years go by. It's wedding time, right? It's showtime. And you'll see that Jacob can hardly wait. He has a wedding feast. But late at night, father-in-law to be switches his daughters around. And instead of giving Rachel, gives her Leah. Verse 21, then Jacob said to Laban, so 7 years is up. Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife. Okay, he's done, right? He's ready for marriage. Give me my wife. For my days are fulfilled that I may go into her. So this is pretty upfront about this whole thing. And Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. Came to pass in the evening that he took Leah, his daughter, and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. Jacob gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter, Leah as a maid. And so it came to pass in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. Surprise. Delicate eyes. And he said to Laban, what is this that you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? Why then have you deceived me? And Laban said, it must not be done so in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Fulfill her week, and we will give you this one also for the service which you will serve with me another 7 years. Another 7 years. Then Jacob did so and fulfilled her week. So she gave him his daughter Rachel as wife also. So, the next day, he wakes up, turns to the other pillow and notices, wait a minute, that is not Rachel. That's not what I signed up for. That's not what I worked 7 years for, but it's her. Now, some of you are going, oh, come on. You mean he couldn't tell the night before? Answer, no, he couldn't. He couldn't for a couple of reasons. Number one, there weren't like wedding lights going on. There was like candlelight. It was dim. Number one. Number two, brides in those days were so heavily veiled, you wouldn't know what's under that apparatus. So it's like, I don't know. I'm trusting that's her. Come to find out the next day, it's not her. Dad kept her away and substituted Leah. So 14, not 7, 14 stinking long years of working for Laban to get this woman. Text that comes to mind, 1 Corinthians 13, love suffers long. Oh, he's suffering, and he's suffering a long time. Love suffers long. Love bears all things. Love endures all things. Love never fails. That's stamina. Love never fails. Well, I don't feel the same. Love never fails. I made a commitment. This is stamina talking. We're in it to win it. We're in it for the long haul. I don't feel the same. That's stamina. It never fails. A common pitfall with couples, we see it a lot, you see it a lot, is deciding too quickly or rebounding too quickly. after a bad past relationship or a previous relationship, rebounding too quickly the second time. Any couple that says they're ready for marriage after meeting each other and knowing each other 2 weeks or a month, red flag. Red flag. It is much easier to get into a relationship than it is to live through a relationship. And since you are doing this to live through a relationship over the long haul, you may want to slow down. In fact, did you know that risk of marital failure is reduced notably by longer dating periods? That should be no surprise to anyone. A lot of studies have been done. Kansas State University said, and I quote, "A strong correlation between the length of time spent dating their current spouses and marital satisfaction can be seen." Also, couples who have dated for more than 2 years score consistently higher in terms of marital satisfaction. That just makes sense because it's all about coming to the place of stamina. You can't be revved up. 4 years, the rev goes down. So there's got to be something more than just rev to keep you going. Now, I want to close with a letter, an excerpt of a letter. Here's what's going to surprise you. It's an amazing letter to me, one of the most amazing I've ever read. This is written by a man in his 20s, his early 20s, to his fiancée. And before they get married, he feels compelled to write this letter. And just think of a young man in their 20s. Some of you guys I'm looking at in your 20s. Imagine yourself writing this. He writes to his sweetheart, "I want you to know and be fully aware concerning the marriage covenant which we are about to enter. I have been taught from my mother's knee and in harmony with the Word of God that the marriage vows are inviolable and that by entering into them, I am binding myself absolutely and for life. I am not naive concerning this. On the contrary, I am fully aware that mutual incompatibility or other unforeseen circumstances could result in extreme mental suffering." This is a love note. This guy says, "I'm not dumb, I'm not blind. I have seen relationships, and I know that entering into this, it will be and might be very difficult for myself or for you or for both of us. If such becomes the case, I am resolved for my part to accept it as a consequence of the commitment we are now making and to bear it if need be to the end of our lives together." Wow! "I have loved you dearly as a sweetheart. I will love you as my wife. But above everything else, I love you with a Christian love that demands we never act in such a way so as to hinder our prospects of entering heaven, which is the supreme desire of both of our lives." Isn't that a great way to say I love you? That's stamina talking. That's sacrifice that leads to stamina. That's a prerequisite. By the way, the man who wrote this letter was Jim Dobson's father. Wrote this letter before they were married to his mother. And I remember reading this before I got married, and it was this letter that cemented what a Christian marriage is to be, and that's what we entered into with that understanding. Now, as we close this service, do you know that believers in the Bible, Christian believers, are called the bride of Christ? Isn't that a wonderful term of relationship? The bride of Christ. In fact, Paul says you are engaged to Jesus, you're espoused to Jesus. All of that language is not religious language, it's relational language. It is God saying, I'm madly in love with you and I want to enter into a personal relationship with you. I want to be a part of your life. I want to be the central part of your life, and I can handle what you have to offer. Just give me that place of throneship. Now, when you date somebody, it's a process of discovery. You're discovering who that person is. You find out they're great, and other places kind of weird. And it's like, boy, he snorts, or she, burps, or whatever it might be. But you work your way through all those discoveries. Here's the thing about God, who wants to enter into a relationship with you and calls you the bride of Christ. He didn't have to date you. He knows all about you. And he still loves you. He accepts you the way you are, and he's just saying, accept my love for you.
That's Skip Heitzig, closing out an important message for anyone who is preparing for marriage, or if you know someone who is or will be. This teaching, Get Pre-Qualified Finding a Mate, is part of our Smart Home series, and we will continue next time on Connect with Skip. Now, here's Lenya Heitzig with our special resource offer.
Does God exist? If he does, is it possible to know him? How you answer these two questions defines how you see the world. Like many of us, my husband once wrestled with these questions himself. As he studied the Bible alongside science and philosophy, he grew confident that the answers to both are a resounding yes. After decades of study, Skip has released a book brimming with truth concerning what God says about himself. In the biography of God, he shares the intricacies of what the Bible reveals about God's character and his plans. As Skip helps you recognize and remove the limits you may have placed on your idea of who God is, you'll gain a better understanding of the omnipotence, the paradoxes, and mystery central to God's true nature. This is life-changing information that brings hope from believing God is who he says he is. Whether you're a longtime believer or you're still looking for answers about faith, Biography of God will help you transform your trust in the God of the Bible and ignite your passion to know him more intimately. Here's how you can order your copy of Biography of God.
Order your copy of Biography of God online at connectwithskip.com or by calling 1-800-922-1888. The book is yours with a contribution to this program of $35. Call 1-800-922-1888. Thanks for joining us on Connect with Skip Heitzig. We're connecting you to God's never-changing truth in ever-changing times.